Hello, hello. Tutu?
Hello, hello. Just testing.
Test, test. Yeah.
We'll get started in a minute. We have one of our colleagues who is running late because of traffic, so she's going to make a grand appearance probably in 10 minutes. But okay. Oh, I think I see her actually. I think she just ran by.
Oh, really?
Something is wrong with the sec. Yay.
Good timing.
Perfect. I was like, I think she just ran by. Great. All right. Yay. All right, we're all here. So perfect. Hi, Brian. Thank you all so much for being here for the Nick Fish One Building, Many Objectives. And my name is Sarah Schubert. I'm formerly the Director of Housing for Human Solutions, which is now rebranded as Our Just Future. And I'm actually at Bridge Housing now, but this project was a labor of love from the beginning of my time at Human Solutions. So I'm really, really happy to be here to talk about this fantastic project.
Got a mic. Hi there. I'm Andre Vilhena. I'm associate at Holst Architecture. I've been with the company about 5 years now and spent the better part of that time working on this project. So saw it from schematic design right the way through to the end of construction. So I think it's got a special place in my heart and I'm happy to share it with you all today.
And I'm Carly Harrison with Edlen Company, and we got to be the co-developers with Human Solutions. And Sarah and worked, it was a labor of love. We've spent a lot of time together over the last several years. So yeah, glad to be here.
So just a little bit about Our Just Future, formerly Human Solutions. Started as a community action agency over 30 years ago and has grown tremendously. Our Just Future is rooted in East Portland and has a diverse range of services from developing, owning, operating affordable housing, as well as a robust suite of social services, including utility assistance, rental assistance, services for folks experiencing homelessness, employment programs, and other social services.
And so we're Edlen Company, and we're a mission-driven real estate investment, development, and asset management firm. And a lot of our favorite projects to do are to partner with nonprofits and other organizations to help complex projects become a reality. So we're glad to have done that here. And a lot of our work also focuses on environmental stewardship in addition to social impact. So that's what we like to spend our time doing.
So a little bit about Holst Architecture. We've been serving the Pacific Northwest region for about 30 years now. And I think at last count, we're probably approaching 50 employees strong. A lot of what we do is based in housing. So affordable and market rate housing, which is what we're here to talk about today. Some of you might recognize Bud Clark Commons in the top left image there, transitional housing. We also do permanent supportive housing, wellness and recovery. The image on the lower left is Fora Health. So it's a treatment and addiction facility that has short, long-term stays to help with treatment. And we've also got a body of civic and education work. I think the design process, our collaborative design process is really important to us. So empowering everyone in the office to participate in design, but also our clients, our developers, our partners, and our community, right? So with the goal to just be making the best projects we can that influence communities and that ultimately buildings people love. So that's what we're all about.
Thanks, Andre. So the Nick Fish is a mixed use, mixed income project in the Gateway neighborhood of East Portland, right on the edge of Gateway Discovery Park. And as I think during this conference, people have said affordable housing development is hard. And indeed, it's hard. And this project had a lot of challenges that we think turned into opportunities. And we're really excited to be here today to talk about them. Just as far as how the presentation or our presentation will flow, I'll give a little bit of context about the project. Andre is going to talk about the design. Carly will talk about the financing. And then we'll kind of circle back and I'll give some more context about the project. And we wanted to have you ask questions along the way. You don't have to hold them. Feel free to ask. I think our presentation is an hour, maybe not quite an hour. So we want to make sure that, we can have an interactive conversation and we'll get started. So this project was a vision, a collaborative vision between the community of Gateway and Girding Edlen Co. Every organization involved with this project has changed names. So, and our Just Future, formerly Human Solution, except for Host. So the goal and vision that we had was to develop a truly community-based catalytic project in the Gateway neighborhood that would be a community asset for years and years to come. And in order to do this, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of collaboration. And I think this project really exemplifies a true public-private partnership and collaboration from many sectors, and most importantly, from the community. And our first goal for this project, and something that was critical to the vision for this project, is to counter disinvestment and prevent displacement. And those are huge goals. And we acknowledge that this project plays a small part in that. But it was really, really important to us that this project was a place, given the history in East Portland and the history of Portland in general, that this project made sure that there was affordable housing so that folks that were experiencing housing insecurity would have a place to be that could bring new people into the neighborhood without displacing existing residents, and also counter some of the disinvestment that Gateway and East Portland in general has experienced. And Gateway in particular has a really strong vision. The community has a really strong vision for the Gateway neighborhood, and it hadn't been realized. And so we were really happy to be a small piece of helping create investment and a community asset in the Gateway neighborhood. The property is on the edge of a new park that was built at the end of 2018, Gateway Discovery Park. It's an amazing, beautiful park with a Harper's Playground. And the community had been the catalyst for that park being developed. And so through this project, which is perched at the edge of the park, we really wanted to activate the neighborhood, activate the park with community serving uses, with housing, with eyes on the park, with retail that would activate the commercial corridor. So we had many, many goals for this. What was very important to us, and which proved difficult to achieve, but is possible, is that we provided high quality, sustainable, mixed income housing where every unit in the building, whether it was a 30% unit, 30% AMR unit, or a market rate unit, looked exactly the same and was integrated throughout the building. So that's something that was of critical importance to us. One entryway, one lobby, every unit looks exactly the same. And of course, we wanted the building to be high quality and to be sustainable at the same time. And Human Solutions Our Just Future, like I said, it's a place-based organization that's based in East Portland. We wanted to develop a new office and service center for in order to really support the not just the participants who are coming to the office, but the office staff who work at Our Just Future, in order to, show them how valued they are and have the participants who are coming to receive services also feel that value and sense of comfort, and that it's a place where they can bring their families. And one of Our Just Future's mantras is really meeting people where they are. And so we really wanted this office to be able to meet people where they are. And provide an affordable space for community-based and BIPOC retailers. And to do that, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but to do that, we partnered with Prosper Portland through their Affordable Commercial Tenanting program, and provided retail that activates both the commercial corridor and the plaza, and will be affordable for community-based retailers and emerging businesses. Okay. Sorry, it's high tech. And I'm not sure do I touch? Okay. So just a little history of the project. Some of it precedes all of us sitting up here, but our organizations were involved from the very beginning. So in 2008, Prosper and Portland Parks and Rec purchased a 4-acre site. And there were a series of requests for qualifications, requests for proposals, which were issued by the city. So the first one was issued by Prosper Portland in 2014, and then swiftly followed by a revised proposal issued in 2015. And Human Solutions and Girding Edlen at the time responded to each proposal. So we were really interested from the beginning in collaborating with the city and realizing this vision that we've outlined. The community was very focused on market rate housing. And so the first, I believe, 2 proposals were to develop market rate housing. And then the third, then Portland Housing Bureau became involved and offered the site through a NOFA with more affordable housing. And like I said, the team responded to all of the proposals and were conditionally awarded a right to develop the project in 2016, pending a community engagement process. And that's one of the really special things about this project, is that the community engagement was really woven throughout every step of the development, pre-development, development, construction process. So in 2016, we embarked on a community engagement series of sessions. And I'll say that the nice thing about it was pre-COVID and they were all able to be in person. So seems sort of revolutionary now, but at the time we were actually able to get people together in a room and really hear what their dreams and aspirations were for the site. And as I mentioned, there were a lot of really engaged community members participating in this process. In 2017, we reached an agreement with Prosper Portland for the development of the site. And in 2018, kicked off our design and permit and pre-development process, which we'll tell you a little bit about later in the presentation. We broke ground at the end of August 2019. So again, pre-COVID. And completed the project and got our TCO in March of 2021 and leased up the project in 2021. So, secret sauce. Let's see how this works. I think there was so much that went into this project and this development, but one of the sort of main strands that ran through the entire development of this project was really our community engagement, listening to the community. And we felt really strongly this project, if you go to Gateway and you see the park, it's surrounded by single family homes. And the single family homeowners had a lot of investment in seeing the development of this project. But we wanted, community engagement is about reaching the entire community. So it was really critical to us that we were trying to reach out and talk to all different members of the community. So not just the homeowners, but also the residents of affordable housing in the area. Human Solutions also owns a project called Gleason Commons that's 100% affordable. And we really reached out to residents and just to neighborhood groups, neighborhood associations, but the entire community, because we wanted to hear what people really wanted. And, not surprisingly, there were some different opinions about how the project should look. But regardless, I think we tried to at least provide a space where people could share their hopes and dreams and try to be as responsive as possible. We were really fortunate to have incredibly committed public and private partners who shared our vision, who were flexible, who rolled with us as we faced challenges, both on the financing side. We really can't underscore how amazing it was to work with Portland Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland, who really, we keep saying it, and I know it's true of every affordable housing project, but this project was truly a public-private partnership from every aspect all along the way. And yes, sorry. We collaborated with, the best. And so that allowed us to, really, when things got tough, when COVID happened, to be able to continue to deliver this project, this highly designed, beautiful project with a team that just was able to do amazing work. And we just stayed focused the whole time. This project was very important to our organizations, and we just continued to work hard and move forward with this vision in mind. And I think having the vision in mind is what helped us move this project along, because we knew how critical it was for the community, how critical it was for organizations, and we stayed super focused. So here is, just a few slides of some of our community engagement. We had open houses, we had meetings, we shared our design, and the community commented sort of at every, iteration of the process. And when we had to change things up, we were able to go back to the community and explain the rationale for why some things had to change. And they were open to it because we had been engaging with them all along. And again, like I said, really having a wide view of what community is and making sure that everyone is included in that view. And these are all of our funding and public partners, and there's lots of them. And we, it was, I don't want to steal Carly's thunder because she has a lot to talk about with the financing of the project, but I'll just say that it's not easy to raise funds for an office. Affordable, we all know how the structure for affordable housing, but this project had new market tax credits. It had low-income housing tax credits. We raised money for an office through a capital campaign. We were really, really gratified to get support from Meyer Memorial Trust, the Collins Foundation, Mabel Clark McDonald, and others. We found amazingly flexible private funders to provide construction and permanent debt and tax credit equity, new market tax credit equity through Dudley Ventures and Valley National Bank. We were able to get financing for the office from LIF. So PNC provided the tax credit equity on the affordable side. So we really had a vast array of public and private partners who shared our vision for this great project. And our project partners, just to sort of amplify the point of having private partners who are committed to the project and who were able to, through COVID, keep this project on time. and on schedule. It's truly amazing. So LMC Construction was just a fabulous, fabulous partner. And many of you in this room have worked with them and know just how great they are. So we ended up at the end of the day with a 75 unit mixed income housing project. 52 units were affordable housing. So there were 7 units at 30% and the balance of the units at 60% of area median income. And 23 units of market rate housing, which was really unique. And 5 of them were set at 80% and the balance were at market. 11,000 square feet of retail space that's owned by Prosper Portland, and about a 10,000 square foot office for our Just Future. And now I'm going to turn it over to Andre.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'll just walk you guys through the design a little bit here. Just to orient you a little more to the site. So Sarah mentioned that we're right on Gateway Discovery Park. So we really couldn't have asked for a better project site designed by Place Architects. If you haven't been out there, highly recommend you check that out. To the north of the site is the Halsey-Weidler couplet. So this wonderful commercial corridor that really enlivens that kind of streetscape along Halsey. And immediately to our west, you've got the I-205, I-84, 3 max transit lines. I think Providence Health Center's there. So just a highly walkable, well-connected site, and just the perfect spot for this development. So pretty early on, we looked at a bunch of ways on how to arrange the mass on the site. When we knew we had an office component, a residential component, a retail component, and a surface parking lot, we studied that kind of a bunch of different ways, and 3 really stood out here. So the first of which was to push the bulk of the mass to Halsey Street, kind of like the predictable solution, if you like, to reinforce that commercial corridor, but it sort of, I think, left the park a little disengaged with the building and facing the parking. The second thought was to really step up and scale along Halsey Street. So you've got a single story kind of storefronts there, stepping up to a 2-story office, 4, 5, 6-story residential tower. We really like the way this engaged with the corner, the plaza, the street, but kind of suffered from similar problems to the first scheme. And I think where this really started coming together was option C here on the right, where we decided to try pushing the mass of the building to the park, putting the 2-story volume on Halsey Street, and having the retail really engage with the plaza there. So we took these 3 options back to the community, had everyone weigh in on it, and I think pretty unanimously people gravitated towards option C. So just breaking that down a little further, we have the surface parking lot, which is ringed on all sides by active uses. So the retail, the parking, a community room. The street scale, second image here, is really mediated by the office and retail portion along Halsey Street. There's nothing taller than probably a 2-story building for miles around here. So it was really important to negotiate that with the context. This idea of eyes on the park, putting the bulk of the building on the park. We heard from the community there's the concerns around safety, and putting the bulk of that massing, that housing on the park just helped reinforce that idea of safety and the sort of, community looking out for each other. And lastly, the image on the right there, this articulation of the ends to create a sense of arrival to the site and further reinforce this Halsey-Weidler couplet. And then you can see a pretty advanced rendering of all of those elements coming together, the building holding the sort of the faceted or the sort of like curved nature of the property on the park, this moment at the plaza where you arrive, and this 2-story volume holding the streetscape. So pretty early on, we were pretty inspired by the work of Annie Albers of the Bauhaus, and we just loved this sense of movement and color and pattern that these textiles brought. And this was really important in studying that 6-story volume on the park, because it's a big volume and it's pretty out of place for this neighborhood. And so we looked at it a bunch of different ways, and these early explorations here look at pattern and color and movement. How do you break down the scale on that site? And there's sort of the evolution of that to these images that you see here, and we really gravitated towards this use of color to kind of enhance the sense of playfulness on the park and contrast the greens. But we took this to the community, and people had like a pretty visceral reaction to the red. I learned that that's a gang color, and you probably shouldn't make a red building in this neighborhood. But I think the comment that really stood out that night was a gentleman that described the building as a prison for circus people, which I assure you wasn't the design intent. I didn't so much mind the circus part, but we weren't we weren't going for prison vibes. But you know, this feedback's important, right? So you can't take it to heart. You have to just roll with it and use it as an opportunity to iterate. And we kind of had fun with it. We studied a bunch of different colors and schemes, and we gave them pet names. Sarah, I think your favorite was Autumn Stroll. I really like Banana Slug, in name only. But ultimately, I think the team and also the community, always engaging with the community through this process, started to gravitate towards this more kind of maybe not austere, but settled down version, classic contemporary version, the Arctic breeze on the lower right. And that ultimately evolved into what you probably know and see today. So this palette of dark brick, Coal Creek by Mutual Materials, a local brick maker, the Rainabond metal panel, this wonderful like metallic metal panel that changes with the time of day, double glazed windows, etc. So it's a really like hard wearing palette of materials, and it's really important to the team, I think, to create a building that it has longevity, that's made out of quality materials, and something you're not going to have to, you know, tear down or renovate in a few decades time. We're in it for the long haul. To further break down that concept of that large volume, you can think of the 6-story mass as, you know, 6 floors of housing with a podium underneath. It's grouped to break down the scale of the building on the park. Again, constantly thinking about how to address this relationship with the park. This idea of a forest or this imagery of the forest kind of emerged in an evolution of this idea of textiles. A gradient was applied across the building to imply the sense of movement and energy. And that was further reinforced by physical shifts in the building. And that really just leads us to the built object that we see today. You can see the sort of the glint and the brick and the material quality of this building is just really, really exciting. Here's a rendering prior to construction. And then again, the built image coming back towards the playground here, you can see the metal panel on the left of image, kind of highlighting your approach from Halsey Street and peeling away to reveal this kind of pattern and this energy of the building. Taking a step back here further into the playground. And I just love how this building is now, like it forms the backdrop to the community. There's so much life and energy, and the kids are playing, and I love taking my kids to play in this playground, and the building just really helps enhance all of that energy. Here's kind of our money shot sitting from, you know, between the plaza and the park. And one of my favorite photographs of the project at sunset, really highlighting the material quality of this building. It changes really just throughout every day and every season, and it's just a real joy to be around. You can see it, obviously the sunset hues picked up on the left and the purples of the sky picked up on the right. On a sunny day, the metal panel kind of turns blue and assimilates with the sky. On a cloudy day, they kind of just disappear and bleed into the clouds. It's really wonderful. And here's our moment of arrival at Halsey Street and the plaza. The brick stripped away just to let this wonderful metal panel do the talking. The building facade step away at different angles to play with the light in kind of unique ways. And of course, a really important piece of this corner, this moment, is the retail at the bottom, owned by Prosper Portland, as mentioned. Undergoing a lot of test fits right now. COVID certainly didn't help the retail scene in the city, but we're hopeful that we're going to get this ground plane activated really soon and really start to enliven this community. So moving to the interiors here, Sarah mentioned there was like a really high value placed on equity, and making sure that all of these units had the same level of finish was a big part of that. So regardless of affordable or market rate, all of these units were identical, not only in material finish, but in location up and down the floor plan. They were completely interspersed in the plan. And you see really hard wearing materials like tile backsplash, quartz countertops, stainless appliances, thermofoil cabinets, plywood cabinet boxes even. And I think it's just not something you always see in affordable housing projects, and it just elevates people's experiences of the project, their connection with it, and of course the longevity of it. And you can see that tree motif starting to make its way into the corridors there, again, riffing on the facade. Moving down into the common spaces, this really was an affordable project and we had really tight budgets. So we had to be clever with use of materials. These are ceiling baffles. If you were to look up between them, you'll be seeing all of the mechanical and plumbing runs. It's just a clever, cost-effective way to navigate materials. We were fortunate enough to add this wood paneling wall behind the mailbox during construction. Again, a testament to the construction team being really well managed and allowing us to have a bit of leftover contingency to put back into the project and reinforce the people that live there. Again, that tree motif visible, I think, in the background of that image. On the lower right, artwork by local BIPOC artists. Had a really fun process engaging with local artists, getting them to kind of engage with the space and have the people have more of a connection to their communities again. And this community room on the upper right faces the park. It's really wonderful, and it sort of bridges this idea of a resident lounge for a market rate project and a community space for maybe more of a lower income project, and melding these two typologies together. Here now, moving to the office space, as mentioned, the headquarters for Our Just Future now. We sort of had this mission to consolidate a lot of the satellite offices, the majority of the offices to this location. And the synergy created from having this office on site and owning and managing these units as part of the portfolio, I think was just one of the special points of this project. The interiors were really informed by trauma-informed design. So natural materials, light-filled spaces, open spaces. And I think the centerpiece of the space is really this floating heavy timber ceiling that just enlivens all of the staff's experience of the space. But not only that, it's, I think, looking here, it's something the broader community can also experience. It's kind of like this lantern for the community. So I think it's a really special moment and a way to, again, give back. Even though it's an interior of a building, it's sort of a way to give back to the broader community. And I think this image also speaks to the success of pushing the mass of the building off Halsey Street and just letting this kind of finely articulated bar on Halsey Street kind of mediate between the scale of the existing street. Just lastly, here's a wonderful aerial photograph of the final project. Again, a large building, but I think tying really seamlessly into its context, reinforcing that park. And I think, as Sarah alluded to, there's some people that were sort of questioning this idea of an affordable housing project in this neighborhood. And I think the great success of this project is that it challenges what affordable housing can be. It makes people proud, I think, to see it and to have it in their community. And I think a testament to the whole project team for bringing this project to life. And I think just lastly, the gentleman who described the project as a circus ended up being just a wonderful, outspoken advocate for the project. And he reached out to us and said how much he loved it. And I love that kind of coming full circle and getting that tactile feedback from the community. So it was really wonderful. That's me.
Perfect. And I must say, have you ever seen renderings look so close to the final project? I mean, I don't think I have. So good job on the renderings. Exactly. So I get to talk about how we paid for it. And, you know, when you follow stunning design, it's a tough act to follow. So I guess I'd love to get a sense of who loves financing in here. Raise your hand. Okay, well, I may leave a few things out. I see you, Anne. So here you'll clearly recognize this image. It's an affordable housing developer. And anyone who's ever developed real estate, there are definitely some balls to juggle and some things to balance, but hopefully never so precipitously that if you slip off the ball, everything collapses. But when you add in affordable housing, as we know, that definitely adds a few more balls to juggle, a few more things to balance. But with the goals of the project and the desired mix of uses, the desired mix of income, including market rate housing that doesn't really pencil in this market, it definitely added additional complexities. We also needed to get new market tax credits to help fill the gap to make this project work. So with all of those things, we had to balance a few things that we'll go over right now. So by and large, the structure of the project was driven by the fact that we needed two different kinds of tax credits. We needed new markets tax credits and low-income housing tax credits. And I know most of us are probably familiar with the LIHTC, but I'll give a brief introduction on each and how they work. I'll start with LIHTC since we know that one more. With LIHTC investment, this is one of the primary funding sources for affordable housing in the United States. And it works where a LIHTC investor will purchase tax credits, which provide equity to an affordable housing project, which definitely takes about 40% of the capital stack. Hugely important. And in exchange gets tax credits over 10 years with a 15-year initial compliance period and additional compliance beyond that. And that compliance is centered around ensuring that rents are affordable to the residents that are in those units, and that they're leased to residents who make no more than a certain area median income in their income, so that it's affordable rents for people that need it. For new markets, it's a little bit similar, but also a bit different. There is also a new markets investor that puts equity into the project that then is actually loaned to an entity that's a business operating in a low income community. So it's a census tract driven tool. And in exchange, that investor also gets tax credits, but over a 7-year period. Some similarities about these two programs are that they have a lot of due diligence. There are very long-term time horizons for these investors, and then all the other funders that are in the projects between 8 years and 15 plus years after occupancy. And so with that, yeah, obviously a lot of due diligence and the associated compliance. But where there are those similarities, there's some key differences. And one of the big ones is they cannot mix whatsoever. They are oil and water. There can be no commingling of funds if these are used. There needs to be separate ownership. And given that we were doing a mixed use project with goals to integrate things as seamlessly as possible, this provided some challenges, but opportunities to kind of create something a little bit different. So I'll go back to the other one first. When developers want to use both of these together, the simplest way is to just build two separate buildings. And sure, they can be co-located nearby each other, but it basically looks like this: a box of affordable housing and a box of some other asset that's not affordable, right? That's pretty simple. Obviously, that wasn't going to help us accomplish our goals. So the next thing that can be done that's actually fairly straightforward is you do a box of new markets and a box of LIHTC. And I use the term box, to simplify this, but basically you will still have separate ownership for each of those parts of the project. And in this case, you would have them be condoed out in a commercial condominium where the new markets entity owns the yellow one and the LIHTC entity owns the green one. In a case like this, you would still have shared corridors, trash rooms, property management offices, and all of those would be part of the condo association, and each of these owners would have indivisible rights to use those spaces. So that's kind of the next simplest way of doing this. However, that wasn't going to solve our desire to integrate the incomes. The new markets was going to be helping fund the market rate housing, as well as the office, and the low income tax credits are paying for affordable. So if we want to have these units that are made to be identical, encourage people living together of a mix of incomes, neighbors, without even realizing it, we needed to come up with a different solution. So we started to get creative. Here, you still have your two separate entities, but we did more of a patchwork approach. And instead of having a box over a box, each little unit is more or less part of a particular ownership. And this is easier to see right here. And this is ultimately what it looked like. So our new markets entity was 23 units that were all market rate, with 5 of them at 80% AMI. And the LIHTC entity had 52 units. And, it's very easy to look at this and think, oh yeah, that's simple. But what is interesting, and the reason our surveyor, we're so grateful for our surveyor, is that you have to have a legal description for every single one of these boxes. And so just for example, for the LIHTC entity only, that was a 27-page legal description instead of like what is typically a paragraph. And you can imagine the recording fees that add up when you have approximately 200 documents that have legal descriptions on them at your closing. So that was the complexity, but it's paperwork. It's a lot to review though. And let's see. Yeah, so that's how we treated the housing component. And this is the 75 units all commingled together. And then we add the mixed use component. So we have the condo unit 1 is retail, condo unit 2 is office, condo unit 3 is the 23 market rate units, condo unit 4 is the affordable component with 52 units. And it was just a 4 condo project. And, just to differentiate for those that haven't done commercial condos, it's very different from residential condos where each individual apartment unit is a condo and you buy that condo. This was very different. There's one single owner for the collective 23 market rate units and the same for the affordable. And that's just worth pointing out because it's a very different thing to develop the residential condos, both from a liability standpoint, getting contractors and architects and developers to want to do it because of the challenges that a lot of us saw after the last condo boom and subsequent crash. So, and then we'll talk about how we got the money or what the money was. So first, the tax credit equity, we have the new markets equity that helped fund and bridge the gap on the office. And then the 4% tax credit equity on the affordable. The senior lenders, we received a loan from Low Income Investment Fund, LIF, on the office, and Prosper Portland brought the senior loan to the market rate housing. And there's a reason for that I'll talk about when we look at our financing structure. And then JP Morgan Chase brought the construction and the permanent debt for the LIHTC side of the project. Next, we have our public sector involvement. And, as we talked about, market fundamentals don't support new construction of market rate housing here. So Prosper Portland played a very significant role in many parts of the project, including bringing kind of a cash flow loan to the market rate housing, which you could look at as it's kind of the equity that you really can't attract in the private sector because returns, don't support private sector equity. And so it came in as a loan, but it's definitely more like an equity, which with a cash flow split of profit. They also own the retail. So it's their equity. Basically, it was developed by the new markets entity, but kind of owned outright by Prosper. And then the LIHTC has a subordinate loan from PHB, TIF, and home funds. And that's pretty typical for projects here. One thing I'll note, as you'll see here, there's 3 senior lenders with first deeds of trust, and there's 3 subordinate lenders with second deeds of trust. And I haven't talked about it yet, but we also had a ground lease with Prosper Portland. And so these were actually leasehold deeds of trust, first and second leasehold deeds of trust. And then I'll also talk about it later, but there were sub-leasehold deeds of trust. So it got complicated. So it takes a village, as we know, and we had a few other grants that came in as well to help Human Solutions Capital Campaign, Meyer Memorial Trust, Collins Foundation, and Maybelle Clark McDonald. We got weatherization funds, and Prosper Portland. Oh, yep. Weatherization and Green Streets grants to help pay for the significant improvements to the streetscape right there along Halsey, which was important for the Halsey-Wilder couplet. Metro TOD funds and then ETO funds came in significantly as we were able to manage contingency incredibly well with the help of LMC, our contractor, which actually allowed us to do the add backs like backsplashes, which you definitely don't see. We upgraded our appliances to stainless steel, but we also added solar on the roof, which was really exciting. And that's actually owned by the affordable part of the project, and they get to benefit with less utility bill. So we received ETO funds to help cover that as well. And this is the final capital stack. 32.4 million. And I'm blanking on the cost per square foot, but I'm pretty sure it was the good old days of 275, 280 for a BOLI project with commercial, 260, maybe 260. We dream of those numbers now. It's I don't know if anyone is familiar with the cost escalation that's ruining our lives, but and yeah, so fairly not a huge project, not a small project by any means, but it was a very each part of the project was very separate, and you can see that here. And I'll talk about some of the challenges that brought about. So the ground lease, normally ground leases, they add some complexity. They're a little bit more, legal stuff to work through with attorneys. But one of the challenges that our ground lease brought about was that, for reasons we don't need to get into here, especially since I don't know if anyone likes this stuff, right? But we had our senior lender for the affordable, JP Morgan Chase. They really wanted to make sure that they had control should anything happen during construction, right? That especially given the fact that there's 23 market rate units interspersed in what is 2/3 their building too, with their the biggest amount of money on the table. And so we actually did the ground lease directly to the LIHTC entity that then subleased the ground lease to the New Markets entity. And this was to happen until we were able to form the condo, which can't happen until after construction or near completion of construction, because you have to have your exterior, you had to have basically the box of your legal description built. And then that became direct ground leases. And we kind of called it a springing ground lease, that upon condo formation, we had these amended and restated new ground leases that are direct to these two entities. There was one other thing I really wanted to tell you about the ground lease, and I am blanking on it, but well, I'll hopefully remember. So challenges. We know that the ground lease added some complexity. It adds legal cost when everyone and their attorneys, and there were just a few attorneys on this. Our closing calls probably had 50 people on them. We also obviously had the state and everyone involved in this. So it added legal cost as well. And we had the multiple condo unit structure. It was really complex, and it was complex for people to get on board with and really excited about. But we were ultimately able to find the right team that worked with us to bring this vision to life. So that was great. And, $32 million hard cost, larger soft cost, it's a good size project, but each piece, because we had to chop it up into 4 separate condo units, was not huge, relatively speaking. And so it was more challenging to find and attract investors and lenders who could take on those smaller pieces. Perhaps for this much complexity, if it was a huge deal, we would have had people begging to do it, maybe. But we were able to get a good team together. And then the other piece that I haven't spent much time talking about was new markets. New markets tax credits are incredibly competitive. There is an amount of allocation every year that is put out by the federal government that allocatees apply for and then award to very, very eager projects, of which there are always 10 times more projects than allocation available. So we were able to attract 2 allocations, which gave us a great amount of allocation, still tough to work with. However, it came with some strings attached that became challenging. One of them required union labor, and we are already a BOLI prevailing wage project. However, after trying really, really hard with our contractor and looking into doing PLAs with subs, we could not make the premium work, and we lost that investor halfway through our due diligence for closing when we were on track to close. It was actually pretty devastating, and we had approximately 2 weeks before our other new markets allocation was about to go out the door to go find a different project, because it didn't seem like this one could work, because it was basically half of the total allocation needed, which put a several $1 million gap on the project. So this is where Prosper Portland and PHB really stepped up to the plate. I mean, as they did throughout the whole thing, we'd been very transparent with them throughout the project of the challenges, but how we were trying to solve them together. And they came to the table and restructured it. The Affordable took on more units. Like, we couldn't change the project at this point. We had 75 units and an office. We had our permit either in hand or pretty close to it. And so the PHB brought more money for Affordable, which they wanted more units anyway. So it was a great win. And Prosper Portland came to the table to kind of fill the smaller additional gap for now what was 23 units instead of, at the time, was 35 units. It was 3540. Now it's 2352. So that all worked out very well. And again, in about 2 weeks' time, we had a revised structure with both public entities, which I think is a record and a testament to the staff commitment and the ability to move quickly, which is not something, you know, the public sector can always do. And lastly, having the mixed income result with those units interspersed, which was key to mission, did add this complexity. We had a lot more in title insurance. We actually had to do title insurance at closing. And then after the condo was formed, repurchase title insurance for each funder and each lender. And then we also obviously had a lot of people and their attorneys involved in the project. So there was more attorney fees for that reason. And because of the complexity, a little bit more time spent on this deal. So, you know, higher costs, but what a great and beautiful project to come. And then how we responded to some of these challenges. I talked about a few of these, but, you know, we worked with people we had relationships with, trusted relationships, flexible lenders, public sector and private sector that really came to the table with great ideas, and their attorneys that brought incredible experience and creativity, the right kind of creativity in structuring a deal that doesn't get too creative. But just great people to work with that were committed to seeing this through. Our public partners, you know, can never stop talking about how grateful we are for their incredible work with us. And, you know, I already mentioned this, but when we lost that allocatee, restructuring the project with it, you know, quickly worked really well, ultimately. As Sarah mentioned, you know, that communication with the community was key. And initially, you know, all of the RFPs that were brought out, you know, a lot of it was just about the fact that community wanted market rate, but no one could, you couldn't make it pencil. And so people kept on responding with affordable. So having market rate housing was incredibly important to the community. When we had to restructure, we had to lose 12 market rate units, which was, you know, initially just a blow for many members of the community, certainly not all, because many appreciated the fact that there's some more affordable. But it's that transparency that we had with them, and the fact that we'd gone back so many times that when we had to kind of bring this news that was pretty dependent to have a project at all, they were supportive, you know, albeit some disappointed, but altogether, you know, we went along the ride. We brought them along the ride. So I guess I should preface what I'm about to show you, which is an example of something that should never be given in a presentation, because it's kind of terrible to look at, but I thought it'd be helpful to show you what the structure looks like. This honestly was actually pretty fun to do, this project. It might not look like it might look like a little bit of stress, and there was a little bit of stress. But I know you can't see anything, and I did change the words in case anyone does read it. It's fine to look at. It's not showing anything anyone shouldn't see. But you can focus on the colors, and the blue is the LIHTC side of the project. And so that little off to the right, and pretty straightforward. There's nothing too unique about the LIHTC side of the project on its own. The red, anything that's a red box, is a funding source for the new markets component of the project. And kind of in the middle tranche, if anyone's ever seen a new markets deal, their structure is pretty prescriptive in many ways on how it works. And there's a couple different ways to do it. We did it with a leveraged loan that had Prosper participate pretty significantly in helping us achieve. And then other parts of the red boxes are different loans that come in, both first, second, and all that jazz. And then the green boxes are where they're, you know, both parties are involved. So obviously Human Solutions or Our Just Future, and then Prosper Portland. And then the yellow is just Prosper only, and that's the retail up there, just off by itself, but still part of the complexity. And, you know, I do want to call out Prosper Portland's overall role too. they were the ground lessor, so they owned the land, leased it to us. That was their goal, is to be the ground lessor. They did not want to sell it. No problem. And then they were the senior lender on the market rate housing and the gap lender, really, which brought the equity. The gap funding came in through a leverage loan structure. We don't need to get into that. And then the retail. So they had a pretty significant involvement. And then how we built it. And I think, Sarah, if you want to just click that button, it should take us somewhere. Oh, I think, do we just wait a second? I can't remember if this is the one we wait for. You should be able to click anywhere inside it. One moment, technical difficulties. Okay, now we do it. Thank you. Make it full screen. There we go. Okay. We used to have music on this, but we turned it off because it felt pretty dramatic. So just imagine less dramatic music. We're just trying to pull the last little bit of slides up. Wonder if you go.
Sorry. All right. So as was alluded to, there were challenges, but we turned those challenges into opportunities. So I think this, just to give context and summary to everything that Andre and Carly said, from the design perspective, some of the challenges we dealt with were, it was a fairly complex site, right? Because there was really no back of the site. We had to figure out from a design perspective, really how to activate all edges, and it was right on the lot line and on a park, which is unusual. And there's not so many projects here in this area that are right on a park. As Carly alluded to, because we had these separate condo units and they really couldn't intermingle at all, not only was it a lot of work for the attorneys, it was also a lot of work for our general contractor, because they really had to, we had one construction contract, but they had to keep every single, we first had to figure out how to allocate between the different units, the different uses, and then they had to sort of keep track of that throughout the entire process. And then similarly, when it came time, while we were managing the budget, we couldn't use our savings, from one bucket for another bucket. So we sort of ended up in a situation where maybe the affordable housing unit had more contingency and we really needed to use it for the office, but we weren't able to do that. So, and we didn't do that. But that created obviously more complexity, both for LMC as well as for us. Parking is always a big deal. This site is an urban site. We had limited parking. We had to figure out a way to provide parking for the retail, which obviously needs parking, but also for the residents, because even though, you know, we want to build housing for people, we also recognize that people need ways to get to their jobs and get to things that they want to do, school, et cetera. So we had to figure out a way to equitably allocate parking. And then, you know, we talked about the complexities during the financing piece of the multi-unit structure, but that complexity kind of continues on into the management of the project and the operations. And so, you know, it's important that we find our Just Futures is third-party property management. So find a property manager who was able to navigate the structure. And it's not simple. And then I guess, you know, really COVID kind of hit the project probably 6 months into construction. And it obviously, you know, was unprecedented, and our construction team and design team really navigated a lot. And we're able somehow miraculously to deliver this project ahead of schedule and on budget. So we don't really know how they did it. They're complete rock stars. And, you know, COVID continued beyond that, you know, to affect the lease up. And I should be showing this graphic, which shows sort of the COVID cases and then the milestones of the project. But as you can see, not only did we have COVID, there was also wildfires, which caused some shutdown of the site for a couple of days. And then when we began leasing up the building, obviously, you know, we had to adapt to new COVID protocols. And similarly, you know, sort of throughout the whole process. So, you know, and also, as Andre alluded to, COVID continues to impact the retail environment and, you know, all of that. So clearly still a factor. The pandemic is obviously still a factor and impacting sort of our whole environment. And despite all of these challenges, I think, you know, the team and the whole project team collectively was able to turn these challenges into opportunities. And so we were able to really, you know, Holst and their partners were able to, or their consultants, I should say, not partners, were able to produce an amazing design that activated the park, the plaza, and the commercial corridor. The project was completed on schedule, like I said. So that was like absolutely amazing. And our lease up, even though we had market rate units as well as affordable units, we had market rate units, all of the units leased up quickly. And as you can see, I mean, it's a beautiful building. And so that was really exciting for us as well as for our investors. They were happy. And we were able to add a solar array, like Carly said. So that was huge. And I think it was really due to really careful managing of our contingencies and our commitment, obviously, to a sustainable building. And lastly, I think there are so many synergies from having our Just Future, who's rooted in the community, who provides services to the community. We have an amazing resident services team at the building, but we also have supportive services that are offered from the office. So that synergy of the provider and operator right there is a model that Human Solutions has used at other buildings. We have a project in Gresham that's similar, and we think it brings a lot of synergies both for the project and for the community. And I think we just wanted to leave you with some lessons that we learned from this project. And it really was, we keep saying it, and maybe it sounds trite or cliched, but it really was a labor of love. It was incredibly stressful at times. Obviously, all projects are difficult. This project was, it was stressful, but it took a long time. We showed you that, we showed you the timeline. It took a long time to put together, but we believe that it will create a lasting impact. And as I just said, the proximity of services and amenities and community facing uses really provide synergies, not just for the residents, but for the entire community. And that's something we're really proud of. And we will it'll continue to get better and better, especially as the retail environment gets better. I think, the team and picking partners that you have a relationship with that, aren't going to freak out when something really bad happens. But, we really were fortunate to have such a great team that collaborated openly, transparently. We tried throughout this project to really have an equity-focused, community-centric approach. We really tried to think through the lens of equity and community, and believe that because of that, and because of sticking to the vision that we outlined at the beginning, really allowed us to develop this beautiful building that we hope will be will have catalytic impact in the neighborhood and community for a really long time. And we just want to close with, the building is named the Nick Fish, and we named it the Nick Fish because of Commissioner Nick Fish, who was an amazing person who cared deeply about the community, who loved parks and affordable housing and had a vision. He was just I'm searching for the word, but he was collaborator. It was nothing, but yes, he was a collaborator, and he was just always trying to make our community better. He was a visionary, and so we're truly humbled to have been able to name the project the Nick Fish in honor of him. And so thank you so much for your time, and we'll take any questions.
So because we have people on Zoom, all questions need to go through the microphone so they can hear. So I will come around if you just raise your hand and bring you the microphone. Okay. And if you could say your name and what organization you're with.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Foley with Earth Advantage. I've got a question on the financing side. So for the commingling of funds contingency that couldn't happen, was that a financing restriction? And was there any possibility or discussions about having your kind of individual funds and then a bucket of funds that you could pull from as an overture?
That would have been nice, but no, unfortunately, we couldn't do that. And part of that was because of this new markets structure and LIHTC, you couldn't have anything connect. And really, like with legal ownership separation and, all funders, they're only funding the portion that they're paying for. It was just really critical to keep that totally separately. Additionally, beyond that, even within the new markets structure, which included the market rate housing and the office, because of our public funders, important and critical involvement, like Prosper Portland, who provided a lot of funds, they wanted to make sure it was really clear that their funds don't go to nonprofits either. They fund things that have community development, economic development. So it was also important that even within the new markets, we didn't use any funds from the housing that were basically Prosper's to fund the office, and vice versa too. So that would have been really nice, but fortunately we did get really lucky with a strong team, and we're able to manage contingencies across the board.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the market rate is probably around, 80 to 100% of area median income. So not too far from the 80% units. But did lease up, has been leasing up, it leased up really well. And
Yeah, and that's true. The market rate out there is about 80 to 100%. And so it's doing well for that market. But one of the challenges is market rate really to build new construction, market rate housing. The rents need to be closer to 150% AMI, maybe more. And right now with costs where they are, it's making things not pencil unless you're doing 200. And that's actually not even at the market at all. So that was one of the reasons that even though it's doing well, given where the rents are landing, it still wasn't enough to make it pencil. So hence the need.
Hi, Steve Oakes, the Homestead Housing Agency. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how you structured your project team with all these, different financing buckets and oversight of construction and making sure that, we're spending money in the right places and that kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, I like to call it at the time dialing for dollars. When we were trying to find the funders, probably talked to some people in this room too. It was really trying to figure out who wanted to take on the pieces of this project. We had, for the project team from the very beginning, Girding Edlen at the time, Human Solutions and Holst and LMC all responded to the initial RFQ. So we were a 4-group team from the very, very beginning as part of the vision. And that continued all throughout. The next funders were obviously, it was PHB and Prosper as different priorities came to the table from the community. And so then working with them to help bring this together. And then lastly, it was the new markets allocation. Once we got those, then we had a project, because up until that point, that was the most competitive resource. We didn't have one. And then it was trying to figure out who our different lenders were, and that was really that was the dialing for dollars piece. But was that your question? Yeah. Yeah, always not enough. But for us, we were, Girding Edlen was an organization of 25. We're now about 11. And it was myself and then Jill Sherman, who's the principal in charge, that we're doing it on behalf of our company. And then we have a construction manager, Dave Daterman, who did all of the construction management piece. And then
yeah, I mean, at Human Solutions, we had a housing team. So myself at the time. And then we also have asset management was involved. I think every aspect, resident services was involved, every aspect of our organization, obviously our executive director, Andy Miller, their executive director, Andy Miller. So yeah, the whole organization. Oh yeah. How did you structure your team? Is that the gist of the question? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Joy Jones, and I'm a new CEO of Transition Projects here in Portland, recently coming out of the San Francisco area, working with an agency who did development, supportive housing and property management. And I want to know, of your low-income housing, what any percentage of the units permanent supportive housing units? That's one question. The other question is, your service team for Human Solutions, are you servicing the whole building or just a certain amount, so that has its place? So those are kind of my two main questions.
Well, welcome to Portland.
Thank you.
I guess the first question is, at the Nick Fish, there are no permanent supportive housing units. There are 7 30% units. Those units, though, aren't traditional permanent supportive housing. So there were no vouchers and no service dollars associated with those units. But Human Solutions, our Just Future, does have properties with permanent supportive housing units and a new development in East Portland called the Aurora that should be finished, I think, in January, right, Holly? End of January, with 16 permanent supportive housing units. And also quite a few other projects that have permanent supportive housing units embedded in them.
Then your service team.
Oh, yeah. So resident services does provide services to the entire building. Yes.
Okay, okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, Carly and Sarah, it's Sherry with Hillman Consulting and Danielle. So we just wanted to say congratulations on a great project, and we really enjoyed monitoring. And can you hear me now? Yeah. We really enjoyed monitoring it. One of the things that they did that was really unique is they bucketized every change order. They bucketized the payout. They had everything divided out between the different entities. So when everything came in, we would break out the percentages of what went to where. And the project really just went seamlessly. It went seamlessly with a lender. It was great. Everybody did a really good job. Yeah, it was a great project.
You guys were great inspectors.
Hi, Tim Wyvinga, also with TVA Architects. And I'm curious, you talked about having the team of 4 in place from the beginning. Is the assumption going into a job like this that it would have a condominiumized structure? And does that affect your contracts, your levels of liability as developer, design team, all that stuff?
Yeah, it was always going to be a condo structure, just given the fact that it was going to be affordable plus even an office and commercial of that scale. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier with a commercial condo instead of residential condo units where you break out each individual apartment unit. It's actually a totally different ballgame, and it's not the same issue from a liability standpoint. So you don't really have the same challenges and exposure after a completion as an architect and contractor and developer.
Great, thanks.
Hello, my name is Kaylin Sanders. I'm with Cascadia Healthcare. My question is your lease up process. One, did you have any vacancy contingencies with your funders for a certain amount of time that you had to have the property leased up? And did you face any challenges with your lease up process in the beginning?
Well, so the affordable housing side, the tax credit investor has projections that we need to hit in order to achieve, to get equity, basically. So yes, we did have to hit those projections. And we did have, when we put together the projections for the lease up, COVID was not a thing. So we had no idea. Nonetheless, despite that, we were able to meet and actually exceed the projections. And so the project was really, really well received. And like I said, both the affordable units and the market rate units leased up. And it probably took, I'd say we were fully occupied by July, August. So towards the end of the summer. Yeah. And we received, just as we received our temporary certificate of occupancy when people could start moving in March.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Julie Priksch with Housing Development Center. In creating your buckets and getting all of the lender team to agree on the buckets, how did that process go? And any words of wisdom that came from that?
Great question. So, I mean, in general, I think cost allocation across different units like this, it's both an art and a science, right? There's some general rules that are just logic, and then there's some areas of gray where you need to use some judgment. What we did is we created in our budget, we had separated them out from the very beginning because early in negotiations with Prosper Portland, it was very clear we needed to show separation for everything so that there was no even commingling of their funds with the office. So from the beginning, we had methodologies that we arrived at with the help of, obviously the contractor too had their own methodologies where they allocated different scopes. And that again is still an art and a science. And then we worked with all the funders pretty early on to get comfortable and okay the methodology used that then would be used going forward, because obviously during construction, there's change orders, there's all kinds of things that happens, there's new things that you need to figure out. And so we had, I think we had 7 different allocation percentages depending on who was using it and what kind of expense it was. Financing costs were allocated differently based on how they were being used. So I think the words of wisdom is to like take the time early on so that you don't create gaps and you're nice to your future self in case you have to change it, because it was one of those things where even if we had a gap on one side, it helped the other side. Like that's no fun for anybody because we can't move those sources over. So early and with careful thought.
All right, it's Tim Wybenga with TVA again. So Carly, I assume, most of what you were talking about and the complexity of that capital stack that has to do with the funding of the hard cost of construction. Can you talk a little bit about what the financial arrangement was and what was keeping the project, keeping gas in the tank all the way up until that point? Soft cost side?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question.
I guess I'm assuming you were 2 years into the project by the time you're pulling together all those funding sources for construction. So what was the what was financing the project up until that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in Portland for affordable housing, PHB has this wonderful thing called a pre-development loan that they give to most projects that need it, that are building affordable housing, and it's up to $1 million. And we took the $1 million, and uniquely, they allowed us to use it to pay for all the pre-development for the whole project, knowing that at our financial closing, they would be paid back both all of it, but by the appropriate source. So the office paid back their particular portion, retail of their own funds, which are or prosperous funds. So yeah, so we were able to do that. And then there was some fundraising that Human Solutions did to help bring the rest of the funds available needed.
Any other questions?
My name is Robert. I'm with Polk Community Development out of Dallas. We are probably going to do a similar project with similar challenges. One of them is parking. How did you address that? And you talked about solar. How did you pay for that? And what do you expect the payback to be?
You want me to take that? Yeah. So for parking, we had 53 spaces overall at the end of it all. So for that one, it was kind of twofold. We had to initially actually allocate those parking spaces by right in the condo docs to allow for all of the lenders to have collateral that was appropriate. So the retail had to have access. The office had to have some parking associated with it. But then after doing that, to basically check the box for appraisal purposes, we have agreements that reallocate that parking based on where it actually needs to be for market to have residents have a place to park, with the office parking offsite in a different location. So, it's not perfect. Parking is always a contentious thing, but even to have 53 spaces that are surface parking and tuck under in a relatively urban environment is a pretty good thing. And then your second question, I just forgot. Solar. Oh yeah. So we were able to have some contingency savings, and a lot of that actually came from interest. We were in a world away where interest rates were still pretty low, and your investors always make you have a much higher interest reserve bucket than at the time we thought we really needed. And fortunately, we got lucky. Rates stayed low for construction, so we were able to reallocate that for construction costs to pay for the solar. And then we also did the solar tax credit as well, which helped provide additional funds to help cover that. And then the ETO funds, we got, $75,000 from the Energy Trust of Oregon to put that solar array on there. So by and large, net of those expenses or net of those grants, I don't remember what the payback is. Payback is still pretty hard in Oregon. but it's probably closer to the 10 to 15-year mark, which is pretty remarkable. I will say with the changes to the solar tax credit out there for affordable housing, it will be much better in the future. And I'm very excited to put more solar on affordable.
I think we have time for one more question, then we'll wrap up. Well, I think on behalf of our panel, we want to say thank you for coming today and learning more about the Nick fish. And we hope that you gained something valuable out of it. I would love to thank our panelists for coming and sharing all this information today.